All right, guys, you have made it to Chapter 2, Section 2. I can see several of you have been watching, and I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate you guys participating and putting forth some effort. I know this has been crazy and right before your spring break, and this is probably one of the last things you have been wanting to do. But I really appreciate you sticking this out with me, and we're going to move into Section 2. What section 2 is going to be about is probably what most of you have had questions about, even though you're totally not using the Flipgrid to ask them to me. If any of you are stuck on how to post the videos on Flipgrid after you watch one of my videos or just use the code to get to it, there should be the green and white plus symbol for Flipgrid down at the bottom. If you poke it, it should lead you into being able to record something, because I really, really would like to hear some of your feedback. If it's just been torture having to sit here and read and listen to this, or if it's been helpful at all and you understand things, or if one of your other teachers is doing something awesome and you want me to try that. So please give me some feedback if you can, guys. But back to section 2. This is going to give some of the reasons of why we believe in evolution or buy into it, or it's not a hypothesis, it's actually been elevated up to the theory level because it does have some evidence to back it. Now, ironically enough, whether you buy into the theory of evolution or you totally are like, evolution is stupid, this shouldn't even be part of our standards, regardless of which side of that argument you fall on, you have the exact same evidence. If you watch the debate between Bill Nye, who defends evolution, and Ken Ham, who defends creationism, they totally use the exact same evidence. So I'm just going to present you what the evidence is, and you make of it what you choose to. I hope you guys are still at least taking some form of notes in case we ever get back and I get to do a note check, but here we go. Our first clues for evolution come from the fossil record. This is obviously indirect evidence, and it's one of the few actual physical glimpses we get into the past of this planet and what creatures may have been here. And when we notice certain things have fossils and skeletons that are similar to creatures we have modern day, we kind of start putting them together like puzzle pieces. Well, maybe they were related. Maybe they were ancestors. And as I explained when we talked about earth science, our fossil record is pretty much the equivalent of an encyclopedia set that a preschool has been allowed to destroy for an entire year and some poor soul has tried to put back together. It's going to be missing a lot of key important pieces. It's going to be far from complete, and there's a lot of gaps in data, which is exactly what our real fossil record is like, because not everything's going to turn into a fossil. You need really special circumstances in order for that to happen. And we've lost part of our fossil record due to plate tectonics and tectonic activities. And we're never going to get that back. You kind of can't unmagma something, to put it mildly. So when we have a fossil, what we're going to use is something called relative dating. In this sense, relative does not mean someone related to you. This is going to mean approximate, estimate, around the ballpark of. So this is kind of like guesstimating, dating the age of the fossil in relation to other objects around it. So fossils are typically found in sedimentary rock, which most of you definitely nailed on your rock cycle test. I'm still proud of you guys for that. Your grades were awesome. And so let's say that this fossil is found in a layer. Well, common sense should tell you that any fossils in layers underneath it are older than that fossil, and any fossil in layers above it are younger than that fossil. Think about it like a magazine subscription. You get the magazine each month and you pretty much toss it in a corner. You get it another month, you toss it in a corner. After the year or 2 years where your subscriptions run out, The ones you got first, the oldest ones, are at the bottom of that pile. The ones you got last, the newest ones, are at the top of that pile. Same kind of concept. This is known by the fancy term of the law of superposition, which again states old stuff at the bottom, young stuff at the top. So here we've got an example of something that has actually shown up on past TCAP tests before. So these are some of the easiest questions to do. So make sure you pay attention and you totally get these right, because you would not want to miss these points just because you didn't read it all the way through or pay attention. And now I'm totally going to feel like Dora the Explorer, asking questions to someone that's not even there and trying to give you enough time to answer for yourself. So, looking at our lovely structure here, what layer do you think is the oldest? If you answered the yellow layer, you are correct. So then what layer do you think is the youngest? If you said the light gray layer, you are also correct. Now onto the trickier questions. So which fossil is going to be older, the yellow spiral or the orange blob? If you answered the yellow spiral, you are correct. This is because the yellow spiral, again, is found further down in a lower layer than the orange blob. And our final question, which fossil is younger, the black comb or the gray spike? If you answered the gray spike, you're 4 for 4. You got it correct. Hopefully you guys nailed that one. I'm sure you did. And I have never felt more silly recording something in my entire life. Okay, so we're going to look at some of what I think is probably the coolest pieces of evidence for evolution. And this is by looking at embryos of different organisms, also known as embryology, aka the study of embryos. So, an embryo is going to be the earliest growth stage of development of an organism. And I realize that not all the pictures at the bottom are from the exact same stage of development. I tried to get them as close as possible, but as you can see, they look super, super similar to each other. Now, sadly, when I copied and pasted the slide into Nearpod, it cut off the organism's identifications at the bottom. So, at the embryo phase, a tail and what we call pharyngeal pouches, aka gills, are present in the embryos of fish, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And since all of these individuals are so different once they've reached their adult form, this is what's led scientists to think that maybe there's some type of connection or relationship between everything that is a vertebrate. And again, logically, that makes some sense. If you want to take science kind of out of the picture and think about it from a creation standpoint, if we were all made by the same creator, then obviously there's going to most likely be some similar patterns in our creation. You can kind of think about it like an artist. If you like a certain artist's style of paintings or drawings or sketching, there's usually something really distinct in how they make stuff that you can pick it out from any other artist. Same thing with a musician or a genre of music. If you really like that musician, there's something distinctive about their voice or the music or the way they put stuff together that makes them stand out from others. So if you want to look at it from that perspective, if we were all made by God, then obviously there would probably be some patterns on how he created organisms, because some of them were obviously very successful. So I hope you can kind of look at these and see some of the very, very like kind of shocking similarities of how they look in their development, and understand how, seeing this, we could think that maybe they were related or shared an ancestor at some point in time. So here's another reason of why we use our fossil record sometime to try to look at organisms that are no longer around, is because of homologous structures. Now, in this instance, the prefix homo is going to mean same. So these homologous structures indicate species share a common ancestor, because even though each structure is going to function differently, in this instance, they're made up of the same kind of bones. So you've got a human, a horse, a cat, a bat, a bird, and a whale. The dark brown bone toward the top is going to be the humerus. The white and light tan ones are going to be your radius and ulna, and then the yellowy ones are going to be your phalanges. Now, I would say the horse probably has the most unique setup of these and how they're separated. The human and the cat, and even to an extent the bird and whale and bat, look super, super similar in the fact that you've got your humerus, then your radius and ulna are connected to it side by side, and then you've got your phalanges there. Okay. Oh, and between your radius and ulna, your phalanges, you've got your metatarsals, if I'm not mistaken. It's going to be kind of like your wrist bones. But you can see that they look super, super similar. Even though, a human uses its arm and hand totally different than how a cat does. And a whale's going to use its flipper totally different than either of us. And even though birds and bats can both fly, you can still see how very differently their bones are situated and structured. So, this is another kind of indicator that because they seem so similar appearance, maybe there was a connection in the past. And again, you can kind of take what I said about the embryos. Just because they look similar from a creationist point, if they're coming from the same creator, then that should kind of explain exactly what you're saying here. It's successful, it functions and works well. It just needed some slight modifications for each new little organism. So, onto one of the weirder pieces of evidence we have. These are going to be referred to as vestigial structures. And what a vestigial structure is some type of structure that an organism has that seems to no longer have any form of function. And scientists think that they might be body parts that were once functional in an ancestor and have slowly kind of outlived their purpose and have faded away in recent organisms. One of the weirder ones that probably a lot of people don't realize is whales totally have hip bones, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever because they swim. And you don't need legs to swim when you've got flippers and a streamlined body and all the other specialized parts that they do. But they totally have little itty bitty tiny hips, which is crazy. In humans, we have a couple. The head, the creepy looking little head here, that's pictured, is going to show muscles by the ear. Now, if you are a gazelle wandering through the plains of Africa, you are going to want to be able to move and swerve and swivel your little ears before, we've all seen the nature documentary. Some type of lion or cheetah comes out of nowhere and tackles you and attacks you. Um, Humans, on the other hand, we've pretty much beat that system. We're kind of the top of the food chain, and we typically don't have to worry too much about being ambushed by a predator out in the wild. So we don't really need to be able to move and wiggle our ears. However, if you are one of the individuals that can wiggle your ears, like my dad can, you actually can make some use of your vestigial structure. Another one that we have, which is kind of sort of deadly to us sometimes, is our appendix. Scientists really don't know what that lovely little thing is there for, and yes, if it gets infected and you get appendicitis, it can occasionally be lethal if it ruptures. So we can live very comfortably without it. But as far as it serving like an extremely vital and important purpose, we haven't quite discovered or figured out what that could be yet. Okay, and we're down to our final piece of evidence, which is going to be direct evidence of DNA. Obviously, this is going to be more recent because DNA is a fairly recent discovery. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the 1930s, 1920s. I have to go back and double check my dates. But I've told you guys this before. Every single living organism, from a rose bush to a banana slug to a palm tree to a cat to a horse to a human to even bacteria that make you sick, is made up of DNA, and DNA is made up of the same four building block letters: A, T, C's, and G's. Now, scientists will compare DNA from living organisms to identify similarities amongst them, and they'll even examine ancient DNA to see how maybe these species evolved from older ancient species. And pretty much they're going to be sequencing their DNA and their genomes and seeing how much they share. If they share a lot of their DNA, logically they're going to say they're closely related and are probably descendants of each other. Now, with the ancient DNA in that last bullet point, DNA does not age well. It will degrade, it will fall apart, and this is not always a surefire method. But this is one of the techniques that we can do directly to kind of see how related, especially current living organisms are. And you can kind of take from it what you will. I've heard that humans and chimpanzees share about 98% of their DNA, which is why people think that we're related. Not that we came from monkeys, but that we were related maybe by a common ancestor. However, on the flip side of that, and I've never researched it to see if it's true, but I've also heard that humans share like 82% of their DNA with a banana peel. So take from that what you will. It's just another little piece of evidence of what we use, and we're almost to the end. One more slide, guys. Okay, guys, so real quick, this is a phylogeny, aka a cladogram. This is really hard to explain without me being there and being able to draw this for you. So I'm going to try and find some videos that help explain this a little bit better than I can just through voice recording. So look for those on my plan book or my teacher page, and I'll do my best to get that to make some sense to you that way. Hope you guys are healthy, enjoying your time off. Looks like the weather is a lot nicer today, and have a good spring break, and hopefully I'll get to see you guys soon.